Hello and welcome to another episode of the Manufacturing Leaders Podcast with me, Mark Bracknell, Managing Director of Theo James Recruitment. Typically, I have quite a structured, formal introduction to all of my guests that come on the show. This time round, I thought I'd shoot straight from the hip, straight off the back of the fantastic episode I've just recorded from Lewis Barnes, the Supply Chain Manager of Tekmar Energy. Wow, what an episode this was. This is a 28-year-old supply chain manager, the youngest person I've ever had on the show. And he was absolutely superb. Inspirational leader, someone who has clearly studied management, worked on himself, worked on personal progression, development, how to be a better manager, understands emotional intelligence, and also went into the depths of procurement and supply chain and the importance of it, the ever-changing evolution of manufacturing and supply chain, and how that has really come to fruition for a lot of businesses, particularly over the last couple of years. Just a superb episode where it was quite clearly someone in front of me who felt that they were in a privileged position and understood the importance of the role they've been given to them by their manager and the fact that they will not let that person down. You're going to love this episode. It was inspirational, and wait till you listen to right at the end the way that Lewis signed off the show in something he'd already prepared, which will definitely inspire every single person listening to it. Thank you so much, Lewis. This was a real honour to interview you. Such a great young leader, and no doubt someone who has a massive future in manufacturing. I hope you enjoy. Right, a warm welcome today to Lewis Barnes, who is the Supply Chain Manager for Tekmar Energy. So welcome, Lewis. We're looking forward to this.
Yeah, definitely, Mark. Looking forward to get started and, like I say, hopefully give a bit of a voice to young leaders in business in all aspects of what they're doing.
100%. And you are the youngest podcaster I've had on, which I'm really looking forward to, because I think it's important to highlight that. You're in a really senior role at such a young age. So we're going to dig around that. I'm looking forward to it. But just to kick the podcast off, as we usually do, what does it mean to you to be a leader?
Yeah, good question. And I think it's really complex, actually. I think leadership is many different things to many different people. Different situations warrant different leadership styles. But to me in particular, and what I try to be is probably a lot of what I've seen in leaders that I sort of admire and aspire to be. My career as I find my way in the world, I suppose, of business. I think the most important thing that really hits true is a self-awareness and a level of emotional intelligence. I think how could you ever possibly expect anybody to follow and do as you require or to be led by you if you're unable to lead yourself, Really important to understand, yourself, your own reactions to things and why you react in that way. And also to have that ability to sort of constantly assess yourself, to develop and be better for yourself, but also so that you can then be better for those that you're leading. Certainly a confidence thing as is not really an issue with me. I think sometimes borderlines arrogance is comments I may have had in the past, but confidence and bravery, the knowledge that you have the ability to do what you need to do, the capability to sort of utilize the tools available to you. And ultimately, the confidence thing plays a part when things are going wrong, I think. Understanding that you are walking the right path, you have been successful in the past in doing those things that have brought you to where you are today. So really just having that belief in yourself, I think, and that confidence to constantly, drive forward. And if anything, I think a lot of it's reaffirmation for yourself, but also to portray the confidence to others so that they believe and buy into you. I think there's a dependability point around leadership. Dependability probably takes shapes in lots and lots of different ways. But ultimately it's that the leaders that you see around you, that you work under or with day to day or for ultimately, they have to know that you've got it. And again, it's probably more a point around when things are going wrong or if something needs to be done. You need to know that there's a person that you can look to, whether that's me as an individual, view myself as a leader, or the people I look up to as leaders. That you can really get them to sort of achieve what needs to be achieved. not everybody will be capable in all circumstances of getting things done, but I think you really need somebody somewhere who you can depend on, and I think that is definitely what a leader should be. Moving on from that, around dependability and confidence about myself, you've got to have that ability, I believe, to coach and mentor others. Definitely, you've got talent all around you, I think, as a leader. You're working with other leaders and people who maybe don't desire to be that, but you have to have that ability to mentor and coach those people into performing to the levels that they're capable of. And even if they're sort of not quite capable yet, you've got to get that out of them. You're only going to be as strongest as your weakest link, and you need to be able to really get those other people performing to the levels that's required for whatever that situation is. And I think maybe finally, the main points anyway from me is that communication aspect. Not just the ability to speak and have your voice heard in communication, but it goes two ways, being capable of listening and understanding, walking a mile in that person's shoes. I think communicating obviously goes down and up the chain. You don't want to be perceived with the people at the lower level as superior to them, but also with the people above you that you work in, your managers, your C-suite staff, your directors. You don't want to be inferior to those people either. Whenever you have a conversation, whether it's you listening or you speaking, you want to try and be on the same level as that person. And I think that's the best way ultimately to get buy into the message that's being delivered, or interpreting that message and try to do something with that information, to respond to. Right. I think that they're probably the key points for me. They're the things I've seen in leaders that I aspire to be, that I want to work towards being, and it's also what I try and adopt and put out into the world with the people that I guess perceive me as a leader.
Yeah, brilliant. Look, a superb answer, probably the most structured we've ever had. So it's almost like you're prepared for that. So superb. Yeah. There's so much to pick from that. I wish we'll sort of segue in and out of certain things, but I like the emotional intelligence piece you mentioned right at the start. I find interesting because I'm hearing more and more now about the importance of emotional intelligence. It wasn't a thing I'd heard probably until a couple of years ago. We actually, I know a chap called Paul Cheatham who's superb, and he's an emotional intelligence trainer essentially. It was only last week I sat and listened to a talk he made, and it was brilliant. And it highlights something I think some people almost, maybe some people still do, but used to maybe think it's fluffy. But now actually people are seeing the importance of it. It's not fluffy at all. It's actually the best. It's a way to get the best out of your staff. Is that something you were trained in? Have you done your research in, or how'd that come about?
Yeah, it actually started in a previous role that I had. We started to do these sort of psychological profiles. It was a HR initiative to do psychological profile on both the managers that existed within the business and also with new recruits as well. And a lot of that was about telling you something about yourself so that you could better understand yourself. The emotional intelligence piece, and it was all about. It was actually the former CFO of that business. He was a big believer in building teams that complemented one another's skill sets, because ultimately no one's good at everything, so you need people who can do this, people who can do that. And they started this away, and it was the first introduction I had to it was when I took the test, got the results and read it, and I was like, wow, that's, you share it with your missus and stuff. It's like, wow, that's me on paper, isn't it?
Yeah.
That was my introduction to it. And then it was all about trying to hire people who complemented the things that you lacked in ultimately. So that was the first part. Then when I joined the current organisation I work with, they were doing sort of management and leadership training with a really good sort of mentor and coach called Gary Fudge, I think it is. And he was really laying on this sort of emotional intelligence piece. We had these little coloured Lego blocks, and you could be one or a combination of 4 colours. It was like a dominant red character, someone who gets stuff done and fiery, a cool blue, someone who's a bit more logical and methodical, like a yellow, a bit of an extroverted people person, and then there was a green colour as well, which was around, a little bit more reserved and loving in nature, I suppose. And all he constantly hit home as we were doing these sort of studies and these courses around it was it's all about understanding yourself to get the best out of yourself. You have to understand why you react to things and how you're going to react to things, because you're going to encounter different situations every minute of every day, ultimately. But then also understanding those people and why other people react differently to certain things, why not everybody is the same as you, and then how to then tailor your understanding of those other people with that emotional intelligence knowledge, if you will, to support them through what they're going through day to day, whether that's personal, professional, or otherwise.
Yeah, it's really interesting, actually, isn't it? And like you say, I think people probably don't realise the importance of understanding themselves before they work on other people, because you understand why you feel that way about someone doing something, and you've got more empathy for perhaps why they're doing something, because they're thinking the same way. Yeah, it was. I read the Chimp Paradox a while ago, and so interesting.
It was referenced in the course, actually, that one. Yeah,
it's such a good book, because you just start to understand, people you've almost just whatever you had said what you thought, but actually you get to understand why people are how they are and why they think. So I find it fascinating. But I think that's testament to you that you've really taken on the mantle of that, and people have training all the time, but it's actually how you then use that to help others, and obviously that's something you've obviously done, which is great. And we'll get back to it, but how, very briefly, how did it all start? I mean, obviously manufacturing something some people fall into. Sometimes it's influenced by parents. What was the sort of first steps for you?
Yeah, I've got a bit of a story on this one, actually. So I'll give you the title. So I wore a suit to a welder's interview, and what it was, I'll explain. So I had a family member who was managing a steel foundry at the time. And I'd just moved back up to the northeast from London, so I spent my teenage years living in London. And I was 18 years old. I needed a job. Everyone needs money and something to do. And I always thought about doing a more practical, hands-on thing, because that's the way that me dad's orientated. So just says, look, can you get us an interview? There's some apprenticeships for welders at the foundry. Yeah, get you an interview, but then it's on you, sort of thing. So remember going to this interview wearing full suit and tie and everything, as I think you should for first impressions count for any interview, really. You're trying to bank a job at the end of the day. Standing in the waiting area, and there's other people around me, they're in tracksuit bottoms and jeans and rigger boots and stuff, probably more what you'd expect of a traditional welder, a practical person. Went into the interview, and the first word out the HR manager at the time's mouth was, why are you wearing a suit? I said, it's an interview. I'd wear a suit if I was going for a job to clean toilets. I want to impress you. I want to get a job at the end of the day. And, all right, okay, that's interesting. And, interview unfolded. Thanked me for my time, and went away and heard nothing, for a good week or so. So I thought, right, I'll tug on the chain of the family member who's quite senior in that business and see what's going on. And it was just give Jackie a ring and find out what's going on yourself. So I did. And she said, unfortunately, we can't offer you the position. There was another guy that we interviewed at the time, and he already had done a little bit of welding in college and stuff, so he had some experience. I was like, all right, that's a shame. And if there's anything else, please let us know. And I sort of said, all right. It was a small village as well, so I was like, who else was interviewing? And she says, oh, well, all the candidates were there. And I was like, what do you mean they were there? She was like, they were in the waiting room when you were. I went, they were candidates for the interview. I found that quite bizarre and interesting.
Yeah.
Myself.
Yeah.
This guy was wearing a Newcastle top, I was like, all right. But anyway, she said, yeah, of course, we'll let you know if anything that comes. And I thought that was it, down the job centre, I'll have to go, sort of thing. And actually, it was 2 or 3 days after that phone call, she rang me back and said, look, we were really impressed, just the way you presented yourself, the way you put yourself across, the interview, the fact that you really put in the effort to impress us here. We're thinking of another apprenticeship, and we'll create a role for you here, sort of office administration type situation. Would you be interested? You struck us as more as that type of character anyway. And I said, yeah, smashing, when can we start? And got myself in there, and the rest, I suppose, is somewhat history. I started out in sort of a metallurgy department, doing some metallurgy work and then supporting the inspection department. Enjoyed the knowledge that it gave me, but again, it's more of a practical, hands-on type role, and I don't think long-term that's what I was suited for. So I started working more on the commercial aspects, bits of support for the sales team. And then there was a guy there actually he was quite aged at the time, and he was doing a bit of buying, the consumable items for the business, the grinding discs and the welding rods and stuff. And he was supporting sort of 2 or 3 manufacturing sites. So there was like a scope to, can you raise purchase orders? Can you obtain quotations? This is the introduction to procurement in a way without really realizing what it was at the time. So yeah, great. Love to do that. Love to get involved. Did that for a year or so whilst doing the apprenticeship alongside and studying an engineering MBQ. And then there was an even older commercial guy who was coming towards the end of his career, and he was sort of stepping down a little bit, and he didn't want to do all of the more intense things anymore, I suppose, as he's winding down and getting ready to retire. And I remember he one day just came in and put the current business's energy contracts on my desk and said, look, we need to save a little bit of money. Do you think you can shop around a little bit and get us a better deal here? And I was like, yeah, sure. It sounds like a big deal. They were spending plus £1 million annually on energy. So I thought, well, this is a right introduction to things, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I had a crack at that, managed to save some money and get a decent long-term deal agreed for sort of the group of companies there. And that was it. And I remember going back to that sort of senior commercial guy at the time and saying, I really enjoyed that. Is there more to this? And he said, yeah, there's a whole profession behind this, didn't you know, procurement and supply chains. You can be a buyer, you can do this for a living, just buy things for companies and support their needs. I was like, wow, how do you get into that? And he says, well, you need to go and get the title, don't you? And he introduced me to sort of SIPs and the chartered institutes that you could study under. And I was like, fantastic. At the time, that business was starting to struggle a little bit, so there was sort of voluntary redundancy options available. And I remember speaking to the HR manager and saying, I'd love to do a SIPS course, which costs £3,500–4,000 a year, and it's a sort of a 3, 4, 5 year long study. I'd love to get into buying, maybe Andrew and Ari will retire ultimately, and I could fill those shoes if the business sort of gets through this difficult period. And I just remember the comment back being, we won't pay for that. You're not going to have something in that. We're not going to have this type of department going forward. We can't support you. And I think that was my first sort of, okay, go back to this guy, ask him what I can do. And he said, look, they're making redundancies. Why don't you try and find a role external to this business? These are the types of titles you should be looking for, supply chain coordinators and junior buyers and things. Go and get it and see if someone maybe won't pay you the salary, but will pay you a salary and also support you in your studies. So I applied for some jobs, and I landed my first sort of real procurement role in a real procurement function at Hargreaves PLC.
Yeah.
So that's the start. That's the
It's interesting, isn't it? I think what I love about things like that as well is that the chap that just put those things on your desk, he's had, by doing that, he had probably the bigger influence on your career in a weird way. Almost like sliding doors, isn't it?
I always look back and think, I don't think he intended to have such an influence, but it's a guy that, he's burned in my brain forever. He gave me my start, whether he meant to or not, whether it was just him thinking, I can't, let's deal with this, someone else can, so this young apprentice can sort that out.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was intentional, he was a great guy, maybe he did see something and think, we can boost this guy up a little bit here, But again, we look for that in leaders, don't we? It's the type of person who can see perhaps a little bit of potential in somebody a little bit younger and give them that shot, give them an opportunity to go and do something. And I guess only when they have managed to prove their worth a little bit, when they've managed to achieve something, then saying, look, you can go elsewhere and do this and really make a career out of this and be quite successful if you apply yourself to it,
Yeah, I think so. I think that's much more likely what happened, because that would have been on him if you'd have had a terrible deal and wasted time and that. So I think he would have seen something in you that you were, you wanted perhaps more than what was in front of you. So it's fascinating. I also love the fact that you wore a suit at that interview, because I completely agree with you. I completely agree with you. For me, whatever level you are, you can never overdress. You can never, first impressions are first impressions. And I still think it's wrong that people almost put people in boxes, but they do. Manufacturing is a good example. He's wearing a suit, must go to the office. He's wearing a shirt, he must be welded. Do you know what I mean? Which is still wrong with the industry, where it's perhaps what's maybe stopping more female engineers coming to the business and that type of stuff, because it's almost that stereotypical view. A foundry in particular is obviously, you're going to magnify that because it's perhaps a little bit more old school than some, but I think that's really, really interesting. Do you think you always, you strike me as someone who is always on the front foot and have wanted more, and obviously you're 28 in a very senior role. Do you think that's always been in you to try and keep progressing that?
Yeah, I mean, my dad's relatively successful in what he does. He has his own business. It's a cash and carry sort of environment. So his whole thing is, and I guess this is where we can start pointing the nature a little bit, and why procurement, I suppose, why I've had an affinity with it. So his whole thing is buying, adding some value markup and then selling things on, spotting trends, what's going to move, what's not going to move, and bringing that in and making some money. He took a market stall from my grandfather and his older brother, and has turned it into sort of, 4 or 5 shops and a larger cash and carry, and still runs some of the more traditional market stalls as well. So I think there's an affinity to that and some nature there. But, I think I always looked at my father and thought, wow, he's not, but, how he's a really successful businessman. We always had good things from me dad. We always had nice holidays and days out and things and nice clothing and stuff. I must have just looked at that and thought, wow, he's uber successful. He's not a billionaire CEO by any stretch of the imagination. But, I think I always looked at that as a sort of motivator. I thought, wow, I need to do this. And he was always on the front foot. He was always getting the latest trends of things that were just starting to emerge, managing to get hold of them by whatever means he was getting hold of them and putting them through and selling them. And I thought, that's fantastic. He's always forward thinking, always on the front foot, always spotting the trends. Anywhere you ever go with the guy, I just want to have a look around that shop just to see what the prices are like. Again, it's always being on that front foot. What's the competition doing? What can I do? And just a sort of desire, really. We also, despite my dad's sort of success and things, I grew up in a really rough area of London, in East London in the teenage years. And that was due to my parents being sort of divorced and living remotely from my father. I guess, so lots of guys and lots of characters from different walks of life there, and ultimately just didn't want to end up being that person. I always wanted to be someone within my own rights. Obviously, I didn't go and pursue what my dad was doing or take a job there. So I wanted to be someone within my own rights, but also somebody who could create an environment for myself that ultimately would be, somewhat of a comfortable life. And I always really, really I wanted the perception of me to be some level of success. Maybe for whoever was perceiving that level of success, the same sort of perception I had of my father, the same sort of admiration for him. I think I always wanted others to then have that same perception of myself, whether that was, my children, my peers, colleagues, whatever.
Yeah, it's just passing on that legacy, I guess, isn't it? Like you say, it's...
Yeah, again, I haven't spent a great deal of time with my father over the years involved in these things, but, just seeing those things alone was enough to give me the desire to want to go and pursue and do something for myself and be, like I said, have that perception of being successful, I suppose.
I think there are a lot of similarities between what he's doing and what you're doing, and let's debunk some myths around, supply chain procurement and buying. I think on paper, people probably think manufacturing facility, buy X, Y, and Z is a price, but it's not like that, is it? There's a lot of change in trend, particularly last couple of years.
It's everywhere, Mark. I think everybody works in supply chains, whether that's it's not whether it's in their personal lives, their work lives, in some way, shape, or form. People are involved in it, and I don't think supply chains, procurement, and such has had sort of a spotlight until more recent years with kind of COVID-19. All of a sudden, the former chief of supply for Tesco's is on the news supporting the government and things. So I think people miss that. Everybody is doing it every day. If you walk into a shop to buy a shirt, you're doing something in supply, you're procuring an item for yourself, is it the right quality? Is it the right, what do you want? You're doing this every day, everybody is. And I just think people don't realize it. It's just that some people figure out that there's a profession to be had there, and some people are somewhat good at doing it, that they can apply that knowledge and understanding of what a supply chain is to a business, to an organization, to ultimately support that organization,
Yeah. What for you is the most important trait to someone in that type of role? Is it more the relationship building, the sales side? Is it, for detail? What do you think is when you're hiring for that type of role, what do you look for?
There's lots of things. I guess they're all transferable skills in a lot of walks of business ultimately, but I think the absolute key is that relationships aspect. Again, back to emotional intelligence and understanding people. And again, we'll cite COVID a lot here probably, but I was in my first sort of somewhat senior position during COVID, and it was when everything was going wrong, in essence, the world was burning around us, wasn't it? The unprecedented global sort of issues being faced. Relationships were what I think a lot of businesses survived solely on the back of. When you couldn't get hold of things, it was, well, who do we know? Who do we know here and there who might have that or can do that for us? Who might be open, who might be willing to open and support us in that. So yeah, I think anybody who can deal with people, and it's probably very similar in sort of sales environment, anyone who can deal with people will be somewhat successful in this. That's your sort of, I think soft skills are so much more important than your sort of hard and your technical knowledge. All of that can be learned and taught and sort of taken on, but the soft skills is a real thing that I don't think everybody's capable of really.
Yeah, I completely agree. And apologies for interrupting this podcast for a very quick 30-second pitch of my business. Theo James are a specialist manufacturing and engineering recruitment search firm based in Seaham in the Northeast. If you're looking for any staff or a new opportunity yourself, from a semi-skilled level right the way up to C-suite executive, then please get in touch. We have a specialist consultant in each discipline ready to help. I'm extremely proud of what we've built over the years, and I'd love to extend that service out to you. Thank you. Enjoy the podcast. You mentioned obviously being a very senior role at a young age. I mean, you've been 25, 26 through COVID at that time?
Yeah, so I started it was a tech it was med tech, biotech and defense sector, research and development primarily, with a bit of manufacturing. That would have been 4 years ago. So yeah, 24, sort of 25 when I took my first procurement manager position in that business.
What was that like in terms of, I guess, getting respect from people and that side? Because obviously you would be a lot younger than the bulk of the management team, I imagine.
Yeah, to be honest, I guess because it was a tech company, there was definitely that old school. So, there was the CEOs and the directors of the business were, the more seasoned professional, 40, 50 plus years experience, degrees and master's degrees and stuff coming out the ears sort of thing. So there was that element, but I think as well, because it was a sort of technology environment and they had very close ties to Durham University, it was ultimately the business spun out of Durham University. So they were quite forward thinking. Actually, there were some good young leaders in that business, but the chief finance officer at the time, and somebody I definitely look up to as a leader, he interviewed me and sort of really, I think was, as I said earlier when we talked about the psychological profiling, he was fantastic at building teams that would complement each other. So within those teams that he'd sort of developed in that business over the years, he had the more seasoned and experienced professionals, but also a younger sort of staff base beneath him. That he was very brave in bringing on. Really, technology R&D is a very difficult environment to navigate your way through, especially when ultimately you're not making a lot of money out of those things. You're reliant on somebody else's funding to create a business out of. He was really, really good at that, and I think that was promising. Firstly, that he gave the opportunity. It was a buyer's position to begin with, but quite quickly we recognised and I put a case that it was actually a management position, which again was bought into and provided to me. And then the other leaders that he had that were similar to my age, a little bit older, but like similar to my age, in that under 30 range, I guess. he was quite keen to like partner people up, mentor. So these guys had been working for Derek for quite some time at that point, and had understood and already thought and created their own rights. To then have them people attached to you to say, you know, this is how we as young people can get into this, and this is how you can do it. This is how you need to handle people of a certain caliber, level, or age, and also this is how you manage these people who are a little bit younger than that. These sort of, you know, graduates and PhD students and things as well. You know, it again goes both ways. But yeah, definitely a necessity to fight a little bit more for that respect. You know, I don't think respect is warranted to anybody, but I think younger individuals put into those leadership positions have really got to put that emphasis on earning it. And it all boils down to what you can achieve and how you can achieve it. You know, not everybody's going to like you. Not everybody's going to buy into what you say. I just believe in not giving them an excuse to have that opinion, really. You know, just show them what you can do, and don't give them any other reason to doubt it and to doubt you and your abilities, you know.
Yeah, love that. And how about now, obviously, you know, Tekmar Energy, you know, beast of a company, big name in a senior role there. I mean, is that something that you sometimes struggle with mindset-wise? You know, people talk about boss syndrome. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, it's got elements of all of what we've discussed already as well. There's that old school manufacturing element to it, you know, so similar to the foundry, you know, thick skin, practical guys out on the shop floor. And then it's also got that sort of forward thinking nature because it's heavily diversified now and ultimately in the renewables energy sector, you know. So it's got elements of two things which traditionally you'd have separated depending on the type of business, I think. So, you know, there's a lot of stuff out of the tech environment, the R&D environment that's useful to me here now, and also things from the sort of manufacturing environments that I worked in the steel foundries that are also useful to dealing with those different characteristics you come to. As you see, you know, the growth trajectory for sort of offshore wind renewable energy is significant. And Tekmar already has a very, very good reputation in the industry as being a sort of world-class, you know, best-in-class sort of leader in the sector of supply that they work to. It is daunting, don't get me wrong. Inadvertently as well, the little bit of luck that comes into things. The CFO from Promec who brought me in, believed in me, and sort of ultimately put me on the platform that I had in Promec, also ended up being the CFO at Tekmar for a short period of time. So by no means was it you're the guy, you can come in. You know, I still had to interview, I still had to meet a team that wasn't that person. I still had to interview with the MD and the HR manager and, you know, get my own, buy my own rights to be here, I suppose. But again, you know, he was there, and I think there was a little bit of this sort of, you know, I remember the phone call actually, it was, I know you can do a good job. There's something here for you that you could really make your own. I believe that you could do that. I believe it's the right time for you to step out and come and do something bigger. If you can impress these guys, then, you know, it could be yours, sort of thing. So I think, again, it's daunting in an aspect of what it is, what it could be, and now being in a position in life where I'm managing a larger team than I've ever had. It's actually my first team of people that I'm now sort of managing and leading. You're dealing with guys who are sort of really, really top performers in their professions. You know, the colleagues I have, the peer group, are really the best in class for what you could find anywhere in this industry or otherwise. So there's the daunting aspect, but there's also the sort of somebody who's believed in you. You've been able again to come in somewhere and demonstrate to a different set of people beyond the person who believed in you in the first place that you are capable. So again, it's back to that, you know, we mentioned what I think a good leader is. It's that confidence and bravery that it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be daunting. You are capable. You can do this. You know, give it your best crack. What's the worst that can happen, you know?
Yeah. And that's great advice. And what I like about it is actually you recognize that you've been given that opportunity. You know, it's not just a given organic. You know, you've been given the opportunity, you've been given that trust, and obviously you're taking it seriously, because I don't think everyone does that. I think people think it's a given. It's a damn right, you know.
Yeah, I think people do. They fall into that trap, don't they? That there's a sense of entitlement, probably more so with the younger generation coming through now, and probably some of the millennials that exist around me. yeah, there is a bit of sense of entitlement, and everybody seems to think they should have everything here and now. But yeah, I definitely believe, look, I think I've worked hard and I've got the belief in myself that I've created this platform and sort of earned this right a little bit. But absolutely, you know, other people have been fortunate, have afforded and provided an opportunity to me. Ultimately, in my mind, it was just, I will never let that person down. You know, they've either stuck their neck on the line, they've had a word in somebody's ear, you know, like the sort of the family member at the foundry, the first procurement manager I worked under at Hargreaves, or that CFO and ultimately the MD who, the CFO at Chromic and the MD who then said, yeah, you're right about this guy. We can bring him in and do something with him. You know, I will never let those people down. That's what it is. It's not warranted. It has to be earned. And I think you have to constantly, you don't earn it once and then that's it. You can relax. You've got to constantly prove and do more and be better as well. You've got to have that drive.
Yeah, love that. And just to segue out of that, you know, you're in an industry now with renewables, which is a really exciting, imagine, time to be part of it. You know, it's everyone's talking about renewables. Pretty much every candidate we talk to wants to get into it. It's still finding its feet. In terms of the role you do, what's that been like working in I guess, well, probably sounds like quite a different and new industry, I imagine.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So I've had a fairly diverse career. You know, it was steel foundry from manufacturing. It was sort of quarrying, mining, and plants as the second role at Hargreaves. Then the tech and R&D, and now the renewables. So I like to think I've had a diverse experience anyway, and dealt with very, very diverse, vastly different types of supply chains. So I like to think I've learned something. But yeah, the renewables thing, it's fairly new to the world, I think. So all of these traditional industries that existed, you know, they were already there, just serving other things. A lot of the renewable stuff leans heavily on the existing supply chain from oil and gas, for example. You know, so it's things that I do know and understand. But yeah, it's to me, it's more so the aspect of what I've now got to deal with, maybe internally, not necessarily in the supply chain side, externally. I'm a bit of a procurement purist. I love procurement and all things up. You know, I've found a real passion for that. I have touched on logistics, but I've never managed logistics, and I've touched on aspects of warehouse management and stores, but again, never done any of that stuff. So all of a sudden, it's a different set of third-party reliance that we have. You know, I've never done sort of waste management, which is part of the stores and warehousing operation. I've never done sort of stock rationalization, stock consolidations, which again is now part of that warehouse environment. I've never had to guide people who've worked for many, many years in logistics and forged careers out of it. I've never had to be that person to, well, let alone do it, more so let alone guide these people through it and make suggestions of how you deal with the world now that Brexit's happened and how you export globally to the US, what the different rules are between the countries and things like that. So yeah. Lots of diverse supply chains, but things that I'm used to dealing with through, you know, just through the nature of the career that I've had to date. But more so, it's the difficulty of dealing with the newer things that I've not necessarily been involved in the past, and a lot of that's just the internal side of things. You know, having to quickly upspeed yourself, do a lot of study around things, speak to other professionals and leaders who have done these things before, and draw from their experience, so that ultimately you can go and apply that to what you're doing now, you know.
And I think when I've been talking to my clients the last 12 months, the biggest challenge has probably been supply chain in terms of the volatility of it. You know, you're now linking in with sustainability as well. You've got energy prices, you've got import, export. It's just been a constant headache for the people. Yeah. I'm sure. What do you think's been the biggest barrier, I guess, that you've managed to overcome during that time, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, you referenced the last sort of 12 months. I think supply chains have been severely impacted for the last sort of probably 4 to 5 years, really. You know, there was Brexit in 2016, which came to a bit of a fruition around 2018-19 in terms of the application and what that meant to the world. But then sort of, you know, we get into early 2019 and COVID obviously commences, you know, and a global pandemic, unprecedented scale of the impact. Throughout that as well, we had US-Chinese trade wars going on. We had sort of natural disasters and extreme weather events going on globally. The whole rapid rapid technological developments as well. The world is being left behind quickly if you're not following suit with the technological stuff. Rapid social changes. How often are we seeing these protests these days about whatever it is, and having to think more about the way that we address people these days because they might now identify different. That's all new stuff, and it's all relevant to the impact on business. In terms of, we've then got a cost of living crisis as well that's going on. Let's not forget, people's minds are not necessarily just ingrained in their businesses now because their lives have become that much more difficult. And I don't think anyone's escaped being impacted in some way by that, regardless of what your salary or position in life is, So yeah, lots and lots of things going on. I remember actually when the CFO for me said there was a role here, a role that you could perhaps come and fill. He was sort of saying, you've dealt with COVID in sort of a semiconductor market for 3 years. It's been hideous for electronics manufacturers, and you've came out of that relatively unscathed. You've done a really good job. This will be easy for you. You'll be coming into a business that's established, that knows where it's going and what it's doing. You're going to know day to day what's going on and what you're buying. And then we get geopolitical issues starting in Ukraine. Market volatility, materials volatility, and energy and price volatility. Again, in things that you maybe never expect a war might actually impact, the price of grain and bread and a nod to sort of what's created a cost of living environment for us. But yeah, the biggest challenge we've overcame, I think it may be a little bit, it's all of these flaws and all of these issues that have sort of came out of what's gone on over the last sort of 4 or 5 years. They always existed. They weren't not there. There was always a risk. It's just people overlooked them. We never expected some of these things might happen. I think all that has done is just intensified and brought to the surface all of these problems that existed. So I think all supply chain professionals, as a result of that, traditionally, the purchasing department, I hate that phrase, but purchasing, it was all about getting it cheaper. We want to increase our baseline. We want to improve our margins, get it cheaper, then get it faster, get it better quality. That isn't necessarily the focus anymore for anybody in supply chains. It's more now about, stability and building resilience for the business, adaptability for the business. I think long gone are the days, primarily because of COVID, where we spoke about relationships being important, but long gone are those days now where one business can hang its hat on another business. We have to have multiple sourcing options. We have to have diverse supply bases so that ultimately when one fails or cannot achieve what you need to be achieved, another one can sort of step in and take its place. You've then got the difficulty of dealing with all of those new relationships that you've formed and keeping everybody happy in that. But yeah, it's the whole supply chain thing has changed now. It's no longer just, you need to save money, and that's what the profession was traditionally viewed as, I think. Supply chains are getting seats at the table now. They're being involved in or being asked to lead the decision-making processes for organizations. And yeah, overcoming that's probably the biggest hurdle supply chains have overcome outside of all of the extraordinary things that we've done because of Brexit, because of COVID, all of that sort of desire to keep businesses flowing. It's getting that voice, getting that seat at the table, and now having a real say in what goes on in organizations and having that sort of that global audience, like I said earlier about COVID and the Tesco's chief being appointed to support governments, and we're all being spoken about now day by day. I think that's a massive achievement for the supply chain profession as a whole, is finally getting it standing in the world, if you will.
Well, that's excellent. And I completely agree. It's not about cost now. It's people trying to onshore the complexity of a lot of people's supply chain, and now is being highlighted, and to get that organise that now is top of the agenda. Manufacturing as a whole, just to sort of lastly touch upon, you mentioned all those things. You've coherently there explained all the issues we've had the last 5 years, which have definitely affected not only supply chain but just manufacturing in general. What do you think is the biggest challenge to manufacturing in the next sort of 5 years, would you say?
I think, again, following that theme around supply chains and what they've been doing, maintaining that stability that we need to create, that sort of adaptability and resilience to the host of changes that we're seeing in all aspects of what we do. But I think ultimately there is the ESG pressure starting to, it was slowly for a number of years creeping into things. It's now sort of being thrust upon us by world leaders and governments and lobbyists and environmentalists. And I think we're all a lot more conscious of this ESG focus now in our personal lives. Ultimately, we're not going to be here to see the fruition of what we've done to the world, but we certainly would like to hope that we can do something so that who is left behind or who is hereafter has something to live on, I think. So there's definitely this real ESG push that's it's going to change the nature of what so many companies and so many businesses do. How do you make a supply chain that's reliant on minerals and metals clean? You've still got to dig the stuff out of the ground. You've still got to ship it halfway across the world. You've still got to melt it and put things out into the environment that we probably should try not to. How is that supply chain going to change over time? And how are we actually going to achieve those sorts of things? Power generation, the very thing that we all rely on so heavily in, and modes of transport and vehicles. How are we actually going to make those supply chains and those manufacturing processes clean? So there's a big nod to ESG as one of the biggest challenges. I think the second biggest challenge is the sort of technology, the introduction of technology and the rapidly changing sort of technology platforms available to world organizations. We're all seeing in the last sort of couple of months about artificial intelligence and the role that might have to play. Everyone thinks of Skynet and the Terminator when they hear those words, I think, but it's probably not quite that bad. I'm hearing that Microsoft is developing, the first quantum computer, and what that might do. They're going to try and develop that computer and then shove 250 years of sort of future science and technology into sort of a 10-year period once they have this available to them. Maybe not quite on that scale for most of us, but what are all of these smaller organizations going to do with the technology? I think ultimately people are going to be left in the dust if they don't buy into and find ways that these technology platforms can really support the organizations that they have. Gone are the days that the old school can manage their companies on spreadsheets and be successful as a result of that. It's technology is going to be a huge challenge, not just the cost maybe associated with implementing them, but understanding, integrating them and making that technology work for us is, there's going to have to be a lot of focus and a lot of time spent across the boards and organizations to really get involved with, adopt and integrate that into their sort of businesses.
Yeah, completely agree. Brilliant. So just finally, some quick fire questions, which I don't, you don't know these. So it's from Plan. Who's the best manager you've ever had and why?
Best manager I ever had and why? I've spoke about the guy a lot. As a former chief finance officer of Tekmar and Cromec, Derek Bulmer. Best manager I ever had, and the reasons for that is probably because of what I see as a leader. He has that self-awareness and that emotional intelligence. He has that confidence and bravery to, in his own actions, but also in the people that he sort of brings on's actions. Ever dependable, nothing you couldn't go through for, regardless of what it is, and you're always knowing that you're getting an answer out of him. And again, that fantastic ability to sort of coach and mentor people, to really put people on a platform that they probably didn't think existed otherwise for them.
Excellent. Biggest influence from the business or sporting world?
Sporting world, massive affinity to football. Played at a decent level as a kid. Didn't quite make it, obviously, but biggest influence out there. I really like at the minute. I've been looking into Carlo Ancelotti a lot. He's done it up to sort of all right. Yeah, it is quiet leadership, I think it's called. But he didn't do it as like, his load of stories from the footballing world and a load of gossip. There was a real focus on the sort of leadership thing within that book, wasn't there? And he wrote it in conjunction with two quite senior, sort of well-respected leadership coaches too. So, Yeah, I really like a lot of what he says. I think, again, the leaders that I see in the world and aspire to be, I draw a lot of affinities of what I want to be from that type of person. So yeah, someone who's hugely successful, has managed to be the biggest and the best in terms of global sports. Yeah, Carlo Ancelotti's a good one outside of business, I think.
Good answer that, like it. What are three things or words, first things that come to mind that make up a good leader, would you say?
A good leader, I mean, we've spoke about them a lot, confidence, communication, self-awareness / emotional intelligence.
Excellent. Best book or podcast you've ever read, listened to?
I really like, I forget the guy's name now, she got me on the spot, but he does the Diary of a CEO.
Stephen Balder, yeah?
Yeah. I really like very well spoken, fantastic communicator, again, on the speaking and listening aspect. And I think the level of leader that he's interviewed and the interviews that he does are absolutely, you can draw a lot from those conversations. I think a guy both doing those podcasts, but also he's been there, done that himself. He's successful in his own rights. He's not just a podcaster influencer, is he? He's sort of been a very successful business. I think he's been on Dragon's Den as well as a panelist. So yeah, I really like that podcast, The Diary of a CEO. That's a good one. And there's a lot of them out there, so you can watch lots of them.
Nice. And any books you've read that have had influence on you, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, we just spoke about the Quiet Leadership one from Ancelotti. I'm sort of halfway through that, but I read. I love autobiographies, particularly footballing ones. So there's a really good Ferguson. There's several good Ferguson ones actually, but there's the Ferguson ones out there. I really like Steven Gerrard's. Again, thinking about what it means to be a leader. Not necessarily somebody who's directly in that position at all times, but that ability to grab hold of something, to be brave and confident. So yeah, Steven Gerrard's really good. Actually, there's a lot of really good stories in that one about probably a different type of leadership.
Like it, excellent. And just finally, the sort of next 12 to 18 months at Tekmar, which we mentioned, it's an exciting time to be there right now in terms of what's going on. I imagine big plans for the coming years.
Yeah, huge plans for the company, huge growth trajectory for not just the company, but the industry in general, big plans. I mean, there's a lot of work needs to be done because of those impacts that we've spoken about, the supply chains have suffered on. So it's got to be a little bit of a reset, and then finding that stability, that adaptability, that resilience to anything else that may God forbid goes wrong in the next 12 months. But yeah, beyond that, really sort of forming the supply chain function here, supporting the team who are part of that, and ultimately working to position this business for the growth that it has in front of it. We've all got a part to play in that, and I'm hoping the supply chain can be a big contributor to it.
Excellent. Look, thank you so much, Lewis. I've been blown away by this. I'm honest with you. I think I take so much away from every single one, but I've taken so much from this. And actually, what I really love is the fact that some people just find themselves in management roles and they just get by. But it's obvious that you work on yourself, you work on personal development, you work on being the best version of yourself as a manager, you work on the theory behind it, and that, I'm sure, will transfer how good your team are because of how well you've done in your own career at such a young age. So look, just a real inspiration, because there will be people listening who are, 23, 24, thinking, I've got to wait 10 years before I can start applying for these sort of senior roles, where you've proved that isn't the case. Really do. So, yeah.
Yeah, look, thanks very much for giving me the opportunity. I think definitely, I wanted to leave with somewhat of a statement. It's, I've prepared this as well, so I'm going to read it somewhat because I wanted to make sure the words were right. But I've definitely worked with, supported, and worked under some incredible young and future leaders in my career. What I find the problem to be is, despite my own fortune, my own stroke of luck, and my own endeavours to get somewhere, with working alongside such inspiring young leaders, that there's not enough of us that get the chance, that are given this platform, a platform similar to this, to speak to it, or an opportunity in business to make a success of themselves. For every me and person I can speak of, there'll be hundreds more that are sort of undervalued and overlooked by more senior, by older people in organizations. And, I've shared my story a little bit, hopefully inspired somebody. But overall, I just want everybody to understand that a leader is not somebody of a certain age who's been there, done that, 30 plus years experience with a bit of a token MBA or something attributed to them. We exist in all ages, all walks of life, and in all matters of pursuit. And that all this sort of, the under 30, the younger people of the world, all we need to succeed really is a little bit of graft, definitely an unwavering self-belief, and then, a bit of a tip to these leaders to exist at that older level, that more senior level, maybe just be a little bit brave and take a chance with somebody a little bit younger, give them an opportunity to shine. And I'm sure that they won't let you down, as I've had those sort of opportunities afforded to me throughout my life. Give somebody a chance. You never know what they can do for you.
Great. What a great way to end. Thank you so much, Lewis. Perfect.
No, thank you for your time, Mark, and speak soon.